Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Dr. Andrew Kim, MD. I'm a board certified psychiatrist, and today's video is a reaction video to a New York Times article that released yesterday that was commenting on telehealth and how telehealth has been exacerbating existing disparities in our nation. So, let me show you the cover of that article. It says, Online therapy boom has mainly benefited privileged groups, studies find. Digital mental health platforms were supposed to expand access for the neediest patients. Researchers say that hasn't happened. And essentially, the article makes a few points saying that telehealth has not lived up to the hype. Telehealth has only exacerbated disparities in America, American access to healthcare, that unfortunately non-whites aren't accessing telehealth, especially non-white youths are accessing them at decreasing rates, and that we are really focusing and cherry picking milder patients, those who are not in the greatest distress. And there's some dramatic quotes throughout this. So let's go look at some of these. So here's one right here. It says, one of the lead authors of a study from the American Journal of Psychiatry that was quoted from Dr. Mark Olson says, I think that the whole system of care, and maybe the internet delivery is a piece of this, appears to be pivoting away from those in greatest need. Okay. Another comment here. Selecting from a large patient pool, they may opt to treat patients with milder conditions and more ability to pay. It's certainly something we should know. There should be light around this. Who are these companies serving? And what does this mean for patients who are most in need? Okay. They cite some statistics here. Like I mentioned, that use was rising among white children, but decreasing in black children and adolescents. And then finally, the article itself ends with a rather broad, sweeping statement, which is what I kind of have a problem with, to end the article in dramatic effect. What we find is that it does appear to be just exacerbating existing disparities, Dr. Olson said. I think there's a real need to try to address that, referring to telehealth. So, why am I doing a reaction piece on this? I'm doing a reaction piece because to me, this is somewhat personal. I'm not here to argue the fact that there are disparities and inequities and that our healthcare system's kind of messed up. You've seen my channel, you know my opinion on that. But I'm doing this because I work in telehealth. For those of you who've been following me, I know that my jobs have changed over the past decade, working in a traditional hospital setting, inpatient psychiatric unit, detox facilities, partial hospital programs. I used to work then as a principal investigator in clinical research, but for the last 4 years almost, I've been working at a telehealth company, working from home. I work for a telehealth company called TimelyCare. This is a company that works directly with universities, colleges, higher education. So we work with public institutions, private schools, community colleges, grad schools, all across the US in all 50 states. Okay. We work with over 300 colleges and universities. Now, I want to be clear, the opinions I'm about to share are my own personal opinions. These are mine, these are my thoughts. None of these express the opinions of the employer that I work for that I mentioned. Okay, these are my personal opinions. Now, these schools have found creative ways to try to subsidize the cost of accessing mental health care. So sometimes it's through built into the student health fee, subsidize it to some degree. Sometimes they found other means of funding so that it doesn't have to directly go back to the student themselves, and essentially found a way that, at least in most cases, there are no visit copays or visit fees, and students are able to now have a lower barrier to access counseling services, psychiatric med management, medical services, health coaching, depending on the services that were bought. Now, I have 51 licenses, so I'm treating patients across the entire US and Washington, D.C. It's insane that I need 51 licenses, but I do. And so that's why I'm talking about this. I'm in the trenches, I'm treating patients directly. So I'm not writing about this from afar as a journalist. I'm not researching this with surveys and analyzing data. I'm treating patients every day as my job across the entire United States, seeing different demographics and swaths of people in different regions, urban, rural, etc. So that's where I'm coming from. So I just want to shed a light and give a different perspective because I think although there's some truths in that New York Times article, I do think there's overly generalized, broad, sweeping statements that are a bit pessimistic about telehealth. So let me share about some of the experiences. Yes, I see disparities, even within our own ecosystem at the place I work. Affluent schools who have deeper coffers can afford a lot more resources than schools who don't have as deep coffers. But you know what? There are positive things, innovative things that we're trying to do, and we're affecting a lot of students and a lot of people's lives. So first of all, let's talk about the access portion that the article talks about. Let's talk about access in telehealth. Right now, the average wait time to see a psychiatrist in our country is about 60 days, depending on your locale. Okay, if you have good insurance, might be able to cut that down, maybe a few weeks, a month. You have okay or bad insurance, it could be months with an S. You have no insurance. I mean, depending on whether you can even afford it or not. I mean, uninsured, sometimes Medicaid can be 6 months sometimes in certain states, even longer, sadly. We've been able to lower that wait time, at least in our little ecosystem, to about 2 to 7 days to see a psychiatrist. A brand new intake, 2 to 7 days versus a 60-day average. We're lowering the barriers to access. That's called fighting against the disparities that we're seeing in America. So I want to highlight that. We service some schools that are oftentimes in semi-rural or even rural areas. Sometimes students will tell me, and the school clinic will tell me, that the nearest county clinic, Medicaid clinic, might be 50 miles away. And if you're a student who's maxing out their loans, working a job, trying to stay in school, maybe you do or don't have a car. Can you make that 50-mile commute back and forth? Challenging. So we're even closing the gap of literal regional distance-based problems and barriers. You can now hop onto your phone, a website, and hop on and get your care taken care of, reducing barriers and access problems. The article, I didn't show you a quote about this, the article mentions broadband internet inequity, saying, only the wealthy and only those well off have good internet access. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I'm not arguing that. But you know what? Luckily, in our little ecosystem, students can leverage the Wi-Fi on campus, the Wi-Fi at the wellness centers and the counseling centers. And if Wi-Fi is not that great, you can use phone calls, right? We have this invention called the phone. So when we say telehealth, I think people always assume it has to be a video visit, but in a lot of states, you can still use phone calls. So we do a lot of phone visits on our platform. Again, phones cost money, phone bills cost money, but oftentimes it's way more accessible and affordable than high-speed internet per month. So we leverage that as well. So phone visits, okay? So you got to troubleshoot, right? The article makes it sound like it's a binary thing. You have high-speed internet or you don't. Oh, well, people have phones too, and we do phone visits. Okay. You saw the concept of, look, brick and mortar clinics, you have a lot of experience with brick and mortar clinics. Oftentimes when you travel outside of your state, sometimes there's limitations. Because of our network, we're able to provide continuity of care. Many of our providers are multi-state licensed. They're not always going to have 51 licenses like me, but for the most part, a lot of our providers have 10 licenses apiece, 8 licenses, 15, 17, 20, that if a student is on summer break, winter break, out of state from the school they're at, they're doing an away rotation, they're doing an internship, we can still see them. Sometimes they might have to switch and see my colleague or vice versa, but we can provide continuity of care. Can every brick and mortar clinic in America do that? Versus, you know what, hey, I'll see you when you get back. Hope things work out for several months. Continuity of care is something that technology can help bridge the gap of, and we can leverage technology for that. You saw the statistics about whites versus non-whites. Interestingly, without giving away too much proprietary information, greater than 60% of our visit usage are from non-white students. It's pretty diverse, in my opinion. Let's finish up by talking about treating those most in need, those with the most distress. Inference is that telehealth is cherry picking, maybe treating the mild and the walking well. Let me show you what happens week to week at my job. We oftentimes are a place where students are saying, I'm seeking help for the first time. This is an opportunity where the barriers have been lowered. I can now finally seek help. And what am I talking about? I'm talking about students who come from families where their parents, their guardians, their relatives were not on board with them seeking mental health treatment. They're against therapy. They're against seeing a psychiatrist to address problems. This is maybe their first foray into doing this. And by not having to go through their insurance and having this subsidized through their school, they could do this in private with a sense of security and calm, that they could seek the help they need without getting into conflict at home. I can't tell you how many times that narrative comes up. Now I'm finally able to seek some help. My parents and my family are against this. That's a demographic and a segment that's in need. There's still stigma out there about mental health. I can't tell you how many international students we see on a weekly basis. International students find American healthcare daunting to navigate. I'm a physician in America for 14 years. I find navigating American healthcare daunting. International students look at me and say, what's in network versus out of network? What's a prior authorization? Why do I need a referral? What's a copay? What is all this? They find it much more convenient to use an app on their phone, hop on a website, click a button, have the ability to have an interpreter join on a language line. And we're seeing a subsegment of patients that are in need. These are folks who come from another country. There may be language barriers, there may be cultural isolation, they may be literally alone, feeling lonely, working long hours in a lab oftentimes, sometimes 60, 70 hours a week. They're tired, they're exhausted, they're isolated. I don't know, that sounds like a segment that needs a lot of help and support when they're away from their families. That's a group of folks we help. And to end, look, in my own personal caseload, right, the idea that we're just treating the mild, that bothers me, right? I'm seeing patients, yeah, I have patients who have milder spectrum issues that are much more stable, sure, but I also have plenty of patients who have major depressive disorder with suicidality, bipolar disorder, sadly, then having some hypomanic manic episodes leading to hospitalization, severe OCD, complex trauma, first break psychosis, borderline personality disorder with chronic self injury, self cutting. Over 7,000 students alone in this just past year in 2024 had significant suicidal ideation. Several of them had suicide attempts, fortunately surviving but needing hospitalization. We have a team of case managers who coordinate with these inpatient units to figure out the transition back to school, back to class, back into our outpatient visits so that they have follow up after they're discharged from the hospital. That takes a lot of intentionality. That takes a lot of TLC. That takes a lot of coordination and effort. And does that sound like the walking well? What I just rambled about, does that sound like the walking well, the mile? Our young generation, there's so many people who are suffering. Some are suffering in silence. Some are grappling with life and death, saying, should I end my life? Look up the statistics on suicide in the younger generation. Is that the mild? Is that the walking well? Is that us cherry picking people? And this is why I had a visceral reaction, right? Again, I'm not arguing the global concept that there are disparities, right? I'm just saying I don't think it's fair to paint a broad stroke comment and on these dramatic quotes that teletherapy, telehealth, is just exacerbating disparities. There's nuance to what telehealth is doing. Telehealth is not perfect. Trust me, you can go Google. There's companies that are in hot water. They're milking it. They're cutting corners. I get it. But there are interesting segments like this where people are trying to be innovative, creative, and leverage technology to try to address some of these problems. Is this perfect? Are we angels? No. We don't have it all figured out. We make mistakes. We drop the ball. But in the midst of dropping the ball, making mistakes, we're trying to help people the best we can. So on an individual level, so go underneath the statistics and get to the individual level of humans. For those of you colleagues out there, whether we've talked directly, whether we've just collaborated loosely or peripherally, for those of you counselors, therapists, social workers, case managers, physicians, nurse practitioners, nurses, medical assistants, school support staff at the clinics, my heart goes out to you for all that you do. You guys are doing tireless work helping the future generation of America, those who are struggling. You are helping some of them in the darkest chapters of their lives. You're using in-person care on the ground, on campuses. You're leveraging telehealth services, whether us, one of our competitors. But we're trying to rack our brains and brainstorm and get creative. How do we help folks the best we can? Holistically, counseling, therapy, coaching, medicine management. So I want to let you guys know, those of you on the ground as well that we collaborate with on telehealth, my heart goes out to you. It's tireless work. It's oftentimes thankless work. I thank you. I appreciate what you do if you're hearing this out there. Your patients appreciate what you're doing. Okay. We're imperfect creatures trying to be non-judgmental, trying to be supportive, trying to instill hope and foster and nurture our patients the best we can in their times of need, in their darkest moments, when their lives are on the line. So keep doing what you're doing. Okay. So if you were one of the folks like me who read this article, got a little bit discouraged, kind of saw that hint of pessimism, some of these broad stroke statements, I know what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. Let's all try to, and for those non-clinicians, I'm just saying, anyone who's listening, keep doing what you're doing. Try to help others. None of us got this perfect. But realize underneath statistics, there's nuance and there are people trying to help people and trying to make this world a better place. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. Thank you for listening to my reaction video. This is Dr. Andrew Kim. Hope you guys are doing well and keep trying to make a difference in the world, everybody. Appreciate you guys.